I would go into 30, 60-day programs, but I would only spend 24 hours there. Enough time to sleep it off, and I'd wake up and I was gone. I didn't find any real hope there. I was strung out on meth, just hurting, burned every bridge in my life that I had, just was at wit's end. I actually heard about Teen Challenge sitting in a jail cell, and so I just said, well, let me pray. I said, God, if you're real, if you want me in this place, would you show me, speak to me, and I'll go there. I would say that was when there was a leap forward. The real change came the day I walked in the front door, really. I came in oblivious. I knew God called me here, but I was oblivious to what was going on. I mean, I was a broken mess. I had been dealing drugs on the street, hustling, doing whatever I had to do to survive, and here I am now in this place, and everybody's smiling, they're happy, and there was just something different about them, and I knew it. It was at that point I think things really began to shift, and God just moved. He changed my life. I think the biggest thing that probably changed in my life was my identity issue. I was this shameful drug addict, I was this bad guy, and I always felt like God was mad at me because I was always blowing it, and coming in here and really meeting Him, meeting Jesus and finding out who He is, man, it changed my life, changed my whole perspective, changed my identity. And I think 20 years later, that's probably the biggest thing I look back to is when I really began to see myself how He sees me. My desire is that people now, as we get the message out more, would understand more clearly what SheepGate is, that we are a place for lives to be completely changed, turned around 180 degrees. I'm a firm believer, anybody that comes into contact with SheepGate, it's a divine appointment. It's a divine intervention at that point. And I can promise whoever's struggling today that if they come in here to this program, that it's going to change their life. Something's going to happen.
Addiction started for me at around age 10 when I was first diagnosed with depression and anxiety. I learned how to manage things, but I really didn't deal with the root issue. These things that I'm doing are just band-aids to mask the gaping wound inside. If I could have fixed things myself, I would have been fixed a long time ago. I couldn't. But SheepGate opened the door for real relationship with God. What I found was not a place claiming that they would fix me. What I found was a home that was open and a place that facilitated me meeting Jesus. And I realized that my problem wasn't with alcohol and drugs. My problem was with unforgiveness and bitterness. So it's really just following Jesus and putting that into practice, learning, you know what, I don't need this. I have the opportunity to go ahead and drink, but I don't have it inside of me anymore that is a compulsion that I have to physically fill. And that's why it can't be a 3-month or a 6-month program. It just doesn't happen like that in real life. You need time to learn to trust someone. You need time to let your walls down. The commitment piece, that's a commitment to yourself. That's a commitment to learning to live life well. That's a commitment to taking care of your body and your mind and your emotions, all of that. It feels like forever, and then suddenly you're at the end and you're like, oh my gosh, it was a blink. And then I look back and I'm like, those were some of the sweetest times. You're with people that might annoy you, or there's situations that really stretch you. But I learned how to be an emotionally healthy person.
I love watching those videos, and you're going to see why I wanted to start with those two videos before we share, some of our men share later on, because they contrast sometimes who we think is the student of SheepGate or Teen Challenge. Those two were both pastors' kids. Both of them grew up in Christian homes. In fact, Bailey, the young woman you heard first, her father was the pastor of one of the largest churches in the Omaha area, and very successful church, and great family friends, love them to this day, but grew up with some real hurt that was caused out of some church hurt, some religiosity that really hurt her as a child and spun her into a life of addiction. And then Brian was a pastor's son locally, grew up hearing the truth, and fell into addiction. Not two of the pictures that we typically say are a student of SheepGate. And so I wanted to start with those today, but first just wanted to introduce myself. And like Pastor Zach said, my name is Michael Hunsberger, and I've been serving in many different roles over the last 25 years, from starting my internship 25 years ago to now serving as president of our corporation. That we have centers in Iowa and Nebraska for both men and women who are at the age of 18 on up. Actually, in Nebraska, they like to change that, so it's 19 and on up in Nebraska, but it's 18 on up here in Iowa. And we have students who, there's no age limit. I've had a 76-year-old complete the program. I've had older that in the program. As long as they want to be with us, we want to be able to be there for them and have the open door for them. And so we have men and women from mainly around the Midwest, but really all over the country and the world end up in our center, whether it's our men or women. And so, but just to give you a little introduction, my wife, I've been married to, if you got a picture, I like to show off my family. This is my wife, Megan. We've been married for 21 years now, and I had to think about that, and she's not here until second service, so I can think about it now. But we've been married for 21 years, and then I have 5 beautiful children. If you show the next picture, and I call them children now, but they're kind of getting to that adult time. Is the far left is my daughter Ellie, who is 20 and attending DMAC and figuring out exactly what God is calling her into. The tall one that looks kind of like me in the back, that's my next, that's 18-year-old who's a senior in high school. That's Grace. And then Nora on the far right, who's 15. And then Gretchen, who's my youngest daughter, who is 12, and then my Lone Ranger son, who kind of runs the world, runs the house. That is Mikey, who is 9 years old. And so he is definitely the spoiled one, has 4 sisters that he likes to control and tell what to do. And so he's definitely the boss of the home. But we've been excited to be a part of the New Hope family for the last 2 years. We had resigned from pastoring, and just really, we honestly were at a place where we were going, okay, God, you first surprised us with asking us to step out of pastoring. That was not on our plate, not on our plan. At that time, I didn't know some things that were going to change with my son, who has special needs, and some different changes in our family. We also didn't know that my dad was going to take a really decline, have a massive stroke. And we were able to be with my mom and dad through that really, really tough year. And had no idea that was going to happen. And looking back now, I know exactly why God asked us to do that, even though at that time we thought, God, this can't be you, you know? This isn't you, wasn't in our plans. And so it was one of the toughest decisions we ever made. But at that point in time, you go, okay, where are we going to go to church? We've been pastoring for a while now. I've been in ministry for a long time. I know most of the churches in the Des Moines area. And so, God, where do we even start? And we first started by saying, hey, we want our kids ministered to. I want to know that wherever we land, while we're praying about it, I want my children to be ministered to. And because it's tough being pastors' kids. You got to be there the earliest, you got to be there the latest, you got to be there, you know, you guys know, and as pastors. And so we just, God, I want them to be touched and just ministered to. And so we said, well, we know that New Hope has a fantastic kids and youth program. And so let's just, while we're praying, let's just start there, because it won't be New Hope, right? It won't be New Hope. No, I'm joking. We'll start there. And honestly, within, I think, the second week, my wife and I looked at each other and said, I don't know, let's pray, but I feel like this is going to be our home. I don't even really want to do the church trial thing and try a bunch of churches. If we both are feeling this, let's just ask him. And I think by the third week, we just said, no, this is where we're supposed to land. And we're very thankful to be a part of the New Hope family. And I was excited to get out here because we've been hearing about the new campus and to just hear what God is doing in the Grimes area. And I got to see the land as we drove by, and just excited for what God's doing. And I believe that it's the beginning of something really, really special. And love the heart of our pastoral team and our leaders that just desire to be what Pastor Zach said, and that is a missional church that is outside of our doors, that is ministering. And it's not just about the show. It's not about putting on a program. It's about letting the Holy Spirit move. And so I'm very proud to be a part of this church. But just a little bit of a show and tell, a little bit to give you guys a picture. If we could put up our centers. This is out in Colfax. We have 80 acres, about 88 acres of a beautiful property that we've had for many years now. And that is a building that was built in the 1890s. And so if you have anything to do with construction, you know that it looks like that on the outside, but on the inside, it's project after project after project. However, we wouldn't change a thing. To have a space, this is our main men's center, so they spend their first couple phases here, plus our regional headquarters. And so to be able to separate them away from everything is an unbelievable blessing that a lot of teen challenges do not have. I've been in centers across this world doing staff training and all different things where I have been speaking to the staff, looking out a window and seeing like drug deals happen right out the window on the corner of the street where that building is. And so you talk about temptation and pressure when you come into a program and you're surrounded by what you're trying to get away from, it can be really, really tough. And so to have that space is just an unbelievable opportunity. And we also are able to provide housing for a lot of our staff and our regional staff out on that property. And so it's just an awesome place. And we've always said that since I was a kid, even when I would be afraid to tell you it, you could feel the presence of God when you drive on that property. It is set aside for what God is doing in the lives of our students. So if you go to the next picture, this looks like not like a small house, but it's actually over 10,000 square feet. It's the Creighton family from Creighton University built this home when it was outside the city. It was one of their summer homes, and it is now the second phase of our men's program. And so right now we have around 55 men altogether between the two. And so they go to that center for the second phase, and that is where they are getting back into finding their own church, getting a job. Really, what we call is the lab class, the old lecture lab analogy. When they first started at Colfax, it's more of the lecture class where they're being poured into. It's very structured. Whereas when they get here, it's time to walk it out. And so there are temptations, there are struggles, and what I would tell you is it's actually the most important phase of our program. It's not about the job, it's not about the different things we have them do, the budgeting. It's about what God does in their life when they begin to take what God has poured into them and then begin to walk it out while they're still under the umbrella of the ministry is imperative. Our next picture should be just an aerial picture of maybe our women's property. And it doesn't show there's like 3 other buildings for staff housing, and that's an old bed and breakfast for the first phase of our women's program. And then we have another home that's not on there, a big farm property that is for the second phase of the women in Odell, Nebraska. And we've had transition homes in Ames and Des Moines. We have some of our other offices in Des Moines. And so, just a lot of different things happening at all the time. But really this morning, what I want to be able to do is I love that we're a part of this series of hope. I want to be able to give you a clear picture of what's happening in the ministry of SheepGate. Because I believe when that happens, every time we're able to share, I shared with the team outside, every time we've tracked being able to go inside of a church or a group of people and share, there's been a student as a direct result in the program within so many months after that. Because somebody was there that said, hey, there is hope for that person. And so I hope today that you walk out of here with your hope renewed, just like I have been as we've been hearing the stories in this series. So what is SheepGate? Some would say, well, it's Teen Challenge Midlands, and that's our corporation name, and I'm not going to get into all the branding stuff, why right now, because I think the most important thing we can do is share what God's doing. But most people would probably say it's a place for addicts. Most people will say something around that. It's for people addicted to drugs and alcohol, and I would say, well, yeah, I mean, that's part of it. But when I ask them, well, what is an addiction? They'll say usually, well, drugs or alcohol. And yes, many times drugs and alcohol have something to do with addiction in someone's life. The reality is when someone's addicted to one thing, there's usually multiple other addictions in their life. It's not usually just one thing. But the reality is that SheepGate is much more than that. I grew up hearing my father say this, who had my job before me for many years. He would say that God has not called me to a rehab program. God has not called me to lead a prison. God has not called me to lead a hospital. He's called me to lead a discipleship program. And you don't hear that much when you go into the typical rehab environment, because what the rehab environment is a place where we are doing our best to teach them about the drugs and alcohol, about the addiction, what it does in our brain, all these things. And I've always laughed at that, because the reality is that if I'm struggling in addiction, I know far better than any teacher teaching me what that thing does to my brain and what it does to my body. What I desperately need to know is why I'm doing it in the first place, and that there is hope for true freedom. And that's the key, is the difference between a discipleship program is that we are not about getting you off of drugs and alcohol. That's a byproduct of what Jesus Christ does. And so what we want to be able to say is that we're a discipleship program that believes that an addiction is anything that controls your life over the power of Jesus Christ. Maybe that is drugs or alcohol. Maybe that's gambling. Maybe that's food. Maybe that's the job, because you run to the job so much so to cover the trauma and the hurt, and you can't face the wife and the kids or the husband and the kids at home because of the hurt and the anger and the bitterness inside of you from past stuff. I've seen addiction look so many different ways, but every time at the center of those addictions are lies that we believe. And those lies that we believe and that we've been operating under, those labels that we've been living life underneath, have led me to something to try to fill that hole, to try to cover up that pain, to try to numb out. And so I run to alcohol, or I run to drugs, or I run to gambling, whatever it is, because I don't want to feel that pain. And it's a lot easier to just go numb out than it is to actually deal with that. And that's why we've always said, the reality is when you look at prison or jail, that's easy compared to a discipleship program. Because in jail, honestly, I've joked that I wouldn't mind going back to jail for a little longer. Like, give me 30 days, I'll take a long nap. If you told me I didn't have any responsibilities for the next 30 days, and I didn't have to worry about a budget, and I didn't have to worry about carting things everywhere, like, jail is easy when you get used to the schedule. The reality is when you're in a program where we're saying, hey, it's not about doing time. You can do time if you want, but you're going to walk out of here the exact same person. Whereas the discipleship program is saying, hey, we want to deal with those lies that hurt. We want to, number one, introduce them to Jesus Christ. And number two, we want to disciple them on how to walk with him. And the most important thing I can do, whether you're with us for 1 day or 10 days or a month or the whole year, is to teach you how to hear the voice of God. And if I can teach you how to hear the voice of God, I know that he can lead you through anything the rest of your life. And so in that discipleship is teaching them how to walk out that relationship with God and how to receive his truth, because his truth is the only antidote, is the only real medicine to a lie. There's nothing in this world that can take care of those lies that I believe other than the truth of Jesus Christ. And so I want you to understand that freedom from addiction is really only just the beginning of what happens. That freedom from addiction is just an outward result of that new relationship with Jesus. And so, as we've been walking through these amazing stories in this series, and I love this series, I loved it each time we've been a part of it and heard these stories, we've been able to have our hope renewed. But sometimes, from the years that I pastored or growing up in the church, what happens in our lives a lot of the times is that the level of our hope has been influenced by the world. And I want to share what I mean by that is that we begin to just hope for an initial situation to be fixed or circumstances to be changed, right? And we begin to just hope for that first thing. We hope that the result that we desire for is taken care of. But man, that is so much smaller than what Christ has planned. And I hope that through this series is that our hope is not just inspired, but it's renewed and changed, where we begin to hope for the miraculous. And then we begin to hope for what God has planned and not what we see as possible, but what we know is possible through God. An example is that like it's the person who's starving and close to death. What do they begin? They begin to hope for, can I just get that next piece of food? Can I just get that first meal that might sustain me a little longer? Because man, if I could just get that piece of food, then I can make it. But in reality is that what Jesus has planned is much bigger than that. He doesn't just want to feed that person. He wants to feed that person and then teach that person, train that person, and empower them into a calling where they go out and they feed others that are starving. But a lot of times, even in the church, especially in the church, if we've been in the church a long time or a while, we've sometimes lost that hope for the miraculous. And sometimes that's determined because we've prayed and we haven't seen maybe God work in the way we thought he was going to work. Or like in my life, I'll give an example, is that I've really wanted to protect my kids as my dad passed away after this stroke. It was for me, it was the toughest year of my life. He was my best friend on a daily basis. A lot like I see, Zach and Austin who have been in ministry with their dads. That's the way we were my whole life. We did ministry together. He was my best friend outside of ministry. We were on the phone every day, multiple times a day, even when he didn't live near me. We did rentals and outside work together. Everything in my life was intertwined with my father. And so when that stroke happened and I was holding him on that night as that happened, walking out that year, toughest year of my life, but one of the things that I've been really hurting for is just praying that don't let my kids hope in prayer and the miraculous be changed because of what they didn't see happen in Papa's life. Because as a kid or as someone who's been in the church for a long time, our hope can be determined by some of those situations or circumstances that maybe God did something totally different than what we expected. And yes, as hard as it was, and as the toughest thing I've ever done, performing his funeral, just the crazy things that I never thought were going to do, is the last week of his life was probably one of the most beautiful, toughest, hardest things I've ever seen. But the most godly thing I've ever been a part of in my life is watching his family worship with him, pray with him, and watching him lead through dying. Totally different than what my kids expected. But I hope that one day they'll see the miraculous in the middle of that and what God did through it and is doing through our family. And so what I would like to show today is that so many times God's plan is so much bigger than we can imagine, so much bigger than what we're praying for. Why? Because he has his perspective and he's not looking through our eyes. And that we need to, as we renew our hope, is begin to say, God, give me your eyes. Let me see this situation and let me see that person through your eyes, God, because I want to see just a glimpse of what's out ahead. I want my hope to be in the miraculous. And so I'd like to share a story of a certain morning that many of you might have heard about on the news over the summer. And it's a perfect example of what God sees versus what we see. It was a normal Sunday morning, and our men had gotten up, got on the bus to go to church. And they were driving into Des Moines to go to church, but it was not a typical Sunday morning for me. I was cleaning up water that had flooded into a basement of a rental. I was mad. I was frustrated, and I had sent my wife, I think, on to church. I think she might have been on worship team that morning, so I was kind of frustrated with that. I was really mad at you. No, I'm joking. And so I was like, you go to church, and I'll go clean up water in the basement. And so I'm down there cleaning up water, really frustrated like this. I can't figure out what's going on. And my phone keeps ringing, and I ignore it. And it keeps ringing, and I ignore it. And I keep ringing because I saw staff numbers, and I'm like, listen, figure this problem out without me. Deal with whatever's going on without me. I'm in water, all right? And so finally, I'm like, this better be really good. This better be good because I'm gonna clean off my hands, get out of the water, answer my phone, and figure out what's going on. And what I realized was they were calling to tell me that along the way, the bus was driving down the highway and they saw an accident that they came upon. And they saw a family standing outside of the vehicle and realized that there had been an accident. And during that time, multiple vehicles kept driving by. They would go around the accident and do what we all do. We got to go where this is not our business. Looks like they're okay standing outside the vehicle. Not my deal. I got to get going. But two of our students and two of our staff members who were also graduates of the program wanted to stop and check and see if the people involved were okay. About that time, they noticed a vehicle down the ravine, flipped upside down in water this high. So that person is submerged underwater. They didn't know there was someone in there right away, obviously, if that person gotten out or whatever, but realized there's something really wrong. And there had been honking, but that honking had stopped. And so at that time, an officer had been showing up first on scene, and they ran down the hill with the officer, and that person is, or who they don't know is in there, is submerged completely underwater. And what they didn't know at that time, that person had just taken his dying breath. And immediately our students worked together really with God's strength helping them to flip a completely full of water car. And they flipped that car, and that officer cuts the seatbelt, and they pull the man out, and that officer begins immediate life-saving actions. See, where most stories end for people like Bruce, who was the driver, God had a completely different plan. And I want to read a letter from Bruce that our guys were able to receive months later. They did not hear from him. We didn't hear from him. We didn't know how bad his injuries were. But we heard from him, and then Polk County reached out and said, hey, the sheriff's department wants to give your guys a hero award. Would you bring them into the sheriff's department? Bruce and his wife want to meet them, and they want to be there with them. And so this was a couple months after this happened, and I want to read you this letter. He said, good morning, and I'm just going to read it. Our story has a happy ending, and finally, I get to meet my guardian angels. It's thanks to you guys that I'm here. We're all here this morning. If you hadn't decided to stop that Sunday morning, I wouldn't have this second chance of life that you've given me. But you did, and I'll never forget or be able to thank you enough for that decision. You made to stop and help out a total stranger and save his life. I don't have any memory of that day or 5 days after. So everything I know is from what others have told me. But I do know that my life balanced on the edge of a knife blade that morning. And if you would have arrived 1 minute later or decided to just keep on driving, I wouldn't have this happy ending to my story. I don't know if you know anything about my injuries or what happened after they took me to the hospital. But after all the CAT scans, x-rays, and exams, they determined that I had a broken leg, a broken wrist, a broken scapula, 10 broken ribs, lacerated spleen, and head trauma. So a nurse told me that about 10 days later that they have a numbering system in their hospital where they give people who come in with trauma. And it goes from 1 to 100, and they give you this number based on whether they think you're going to live and not be brain injured. They gave me a 3. But I did improve. And a couple days later, they did surgery and inserted titanium plates, multiple places in my body, one to hold my ribs together. After a week, they moved me out of intensive care, and after another week, they transferred me to a hospital in Kansas City where I live to stay in another inpatient rehab hospital for more than a couple weeks again. Finally, after a month in the hospital, I got to go home, and I continue to go outpatient physical therapy. So because of you, we truly have a happy ending. I'll never be able to thank you enough for what you decided to do that day. You stopped to help a total stranger, and you saved his life. There's a Bible verse that I think is so appropriate here, where Jesus says, whatsoever you have done for the least of these, my brethren, you have done for me. And based on this, I truly believe that even though I can never thank you enough, your reward will indeed be great in heaven. Thank you, Bruce. See, it's much easier to realize just how miraculous that story of our students stopping to help that driver is when we fully begin to realize who our students are and what was happening in their life, some of them a week before, a month before, a couple months before. To do that, we have to understand what our students' realities were when they walked through our doors. Sometimes as a church or a longtime Christian, we lack the empathy for someone in addiction, especially adults. It's easier with children, but we blame them, we label them. We say, just get a job and say yes to your kids, and some of the dumbest slogans in the world. Say no to drugs. I don't know if we have a place like SheepGate if we can just say no to drugs. But we tell them all these different things. He needs to get a job and work and stop saying yes to his old friends and stop saying yes. She needs to just be a mother. And we put all these boundaries up and we put addiction in a box, right? But the reality is that addiction, hurt, trauma knows no boundaries. Doesn't know any community that it has to stay out of, or age group it doesn't go into, or sex, or race, or culture. Addiction is all around us, around this world. And I love that the love of Jesus Christ, the message of freedom that he's called us to spread, is still true today. And they are in desperate need of somebody like you and I that has had our hope renewed to share with them that there is hope. In the middle of your addiction, there is hope. In the middle of the pit of despair, there is hope. And so I want to ask Michael Foreman, who's one of our staff members, to bring 4 of our guys up here to share with you the difference between the realities in their life today and what it was when they walked in.
What is reality? Reality is your father closing down the bar with his customers and getting home hammered drunk at 3 o'clock in the morning just to go into your mom's bedroom to pick a fight. And you're sitting outside your bedroom door trying to build up the courage to go in and stop him. Reality is pulling up to the stop sign on 70th and Aurora, looking over and seeing your football team getting ready for practice, but realizing you'd rather go down the street and get high with your friends instead of playing the game you love. Reality is having your father commit suicide at 17 years old, and the only way you can escape the pain is by getting so high on meth, you don't even know what reality is anymore. Reality is smoking meth in the bathroom of a church in the middle of a service because you just can't wait to take another hit. And reality is being homeless, living out of your car at 19 years old because you've burned all your bridges. And now the only thing you have left to do is sit there and freeze to death. How do I know that's reality? Because that was me.
Reality is growing up in a family where everyone you look up to does meth and lives a criminal lifestyle. Reality is a father who abandons you for a life of drugs and prison. Reality is getting kicked out of the Marine Corps for drug abuse and losing out on a childhood dream. Reality is spending the next 6 years getting blackout drunk, planning the best way to kill yourself. And reality is getting in a drunken argument with your twin brother and putting a loaded pistol to his head. How do I know that's reality? Because that was me.
Reality is being so lost at the age of 9 years old that you're led to put a needle in your arm just so you could fit in. Reality is manipulating everyone around you for personal gain and wondering why you're so lost and alone. Reality is abandoning your 3 kids to chase drugs and women, only to end up in jails and prison, totally absent from their lives. Reality is your father dying of cancer and knowing your addiction was just a disappointment to him. Reality is watching your entire life dissolve in front of you while all you can do is put another shot in your arm in hopes to end your life. How do I know that was reality? Because that was me.
Reality is growing up in a trailer park with your parents fighting often, and both of them secretly using drugs in your home. Reality is being sexually assaulted in the 3rd grade, causing you to lose your self-worth and your understanding of healthy relationships. Reality is having your father leave your family to move in with another woman. But one day, you wake up in your home and your mother is missing because she chose to run off and get high instead of take care of you and your brother. Reality is dropping out of high school a few months before graduating because you started drinking and using drugs and would rather have fun than be responsible. Reality is, earning your GED, working hard in life to grow your own business and to be successful, only to have your addiction grow out of control, causing you to lose everything that you worked so hard for, your business, relationships, and your reputation. How do I know that's reality? Because that was me.
Reality is being born 3 months premature to a 14-year-old victim of rape, spending the first year of your life in an incubator, nearly dying twice. Reality is being adopted by two people who tried their best, but in the end, send you on a downward spiral of using and selling drugs when they get a divorce. Reality is your father signing the paperwork for you to drop out of high school just to turn around and sign his rights over when you get popped selling drugs at the school that you just dropped out of. Reality is falling in love, getting married, and having two beautiful children, but that not being good enough to keep you clean. Reality is after losing your family, you think you finally come to the end of yourself and turn to God. And when he shows you his will for your life, you get scared and you run away because you feel unworthy of everything he's called you to. How do I know that's reality? Because that was me.
Even though we've all had different realities, we've all been changed by the same truth. Truth is, God has broke the generational curse off of my family tree. And because of the victories that Jesus has won in my life, my kids don't have to grow up with the same trauma that I did. Truth is, I no longer quit on the things I love. By the grace of God, I completed SheepGate. I graduated from theology school. I've served in ministry for the last 11 years. I've been a husband to my wife, Natalie, and a father to my sons, Josiah and Hayden. Truth is, God is the father to the fatherless. And even though my earthly father is no longer here, my heavenly Father never leaves my side. Truth is, I am living proof that once an addict does not mean always an addict. The blood of Jesus is strong enough to break every chain and set every captive free. And truth is, God met me in that freezing car. And it took me getting to that place in my life for me to realize that my way was never going to work and that his way is so much greater than my own.
The truth is, God has changed my life, and he's given me a chance to break generational curses. The truth is, God is my heavenly Father, and he will never abandon me. The truth is, where I've lost the opportunity to serve in the Marine Corps, I've gained the desire to heal and save through EMS work. And the truth is, I wake up every single morning praising God for the breath in my lungs and another day to live, serve, and glorify him. And the truth is, God took that pistol out of my hands and put the Holy Spirit in my heart, filling me with love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control.
The truth is, the man that I see in the mirror today is a man that God accepts, and so do I. The truth is, other people's needs matter more to me now than my own, and I find great joy out of serving others instead of myself. And the truth is, even though I was absent from my kids' lives for 8 years, God has been restoring that relationship. And since attending SheepGate, I've had visits with my daughter and my youngest son, and our relationship is growing. And the truth is, my Father is in heaven and is proud of the man that I am today. And the truth is, God has filled me with hope and called me to spread the good news of Jesus Christ to the lost and the broken, because my life is a living testimony that God can and will change your life.
The truth is, God is healing the generational trauma that has impacted my family. My first weekend at SheepGate, my father drove across the state to spend his birthday with me in church, and our relationship has been growing stronger since. The truth is, I no longer search for my self-worth through addictive behaviors because God has shown me that I am worthy of his love, and there's nothing that I have to do to earn it. The truth is, although both of my parents abandoned me, God has shown me that his love never fails. He pursued me during one of the darkest times of my life by sending me a stranger to pray with me in a store, who gave me a Bible and led me to SheepGate. Truth is, today, I am a man of integrity, and I no longer chase after what feels good in the moment. But in everything I do, I work at it with all my heart, working for the Lord, knowing that my reward is an inheritance from God that will last forever. And the truth is, I'm no longer mourning the things I lost because God has given me a second chance in life. Today, I get to be that stranger in a store, seeking out hurting people and telling them all about how Jesus saved my life and to help them encounter him too.
Truth is, although I was born into the most broken of circumstances, God has taken what the enemy meant for evil and used it for good and shown me he's had a plan for my life from the very start. Truth is, although my parents' divorce was hard, God used it to bring my mom closer to him. And until she went to heaven, she never stopped telling me how much God loved me. Truth is, although my father signed the papers to abandon me, my heavenly Father has signed my name into the book of life, and neither height nor depth can separate me from that love. Truth is, 3 months ago, I didn't think I'd see my kids ever again. But since coming to SheepGate, God has reunited me with them, and I look forward to being the dad that I never had. Truth is, just like Jonah, I tried to run from God's calling on my life. I had to spend time in the belly of the whale until God placed me right where I left off, and now I'm answering that call.
And Jesus said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will make you free."
Doesn't matter how many times I hear our men or women share, it brings me to tears because it reminds me of why I do what I do in the really hard times. And the times when I ask God, why can't you just release me from this mission for just a little bit? That's exactly why we do it. I leaned over to Zach and I said, didn't you just say that we need to go into the grocery store and be willing to take the extra time? And forgot that I had heard our guys say, I don't know which one of you just said that we were in the store. And that's awesome. That's what we are talking about in this series. When we understand the miracles that had to happen in the lives of our students who literally were called back from the grave, from the darkest situations, back to life. Lives of so many people that so many others had given up on and said, there is no hope. Don't waste your time. It's not going to change. It's not going to happen. They've been labeled broken, addicts, failures, and so many other names. People who themselves had tried so many times to break free, but had fallen right back into that addiction. But were in the same place, desperately needing another chance at life, desperately needing a miracle. And that's when we begin to understand how big of a miracle it really was that they were on that Sunday morning on a bus together, had no idea who each other were just a short time before, had definitely no reason to be on a bus helping someone, on a bus together at that second that God had them there in that moment. And when so many others drove on by, they said, let's stop to figure out what's going on. And now Bruce has a life and his family has been changed forever. They weren't worried about their church clothes, not worried about their schedule, not worried about their plans, but willing to see what it would take to make sure someone didn't need rescued in that moment. When you think of SheepGate, it really is just a blend of many stories in the Bible. And I was sitting down to look at this, and you look in Luke 15, right? Or the prodigal son in Luke 15. You have the restoration of Peter in John 21, and then the Good Samaritan in Luke 10. It's really a blend of all three of these. See, we have this hope for that loved one that's in addiction. We have this hope that those that are lost in our life, that they make it, that they're found, that they're rescued. The prodigal sons. We're either that prodigal son ourselves or the family of that prodigal, praying, desperate for them. Hoping that they return, hoping that they get free from addiction, free from that sin. But then we see the Father's heart. We see in the Father's heart and the love for them when the Father, against all cultural norms, runs to meet his Son. And we see it shared so beautifully in Luke 15:20, this action of the Father. So he got up and went to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him, was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. Then when they make it home, they need so much more than that. His father's love went beyond just running to meet him. His father wanted to celebrate his homecoming. He wanted to kill the fattened calf and celebrate with those around him that my son has returned. And they need that love, that grace when they mess up. They need restored and empowered. And we see that perfect example in the restoration of Peter, in a moment where Peter must have been carrying such a weight of shame and guilt for denying Christ, even when he had so pridefully said, I would never do that. That weight of what would have been on his heart for that denial. And Jesus knew that. And he was concerned about his heart. And he wanted to restore him. Why? Because he didn't just have hope that they would become good friends again. He didn't have hope that Peter would just be okay again. He had hope because he knew what Peter was designed for and created for, and it was to build the church. And so he wanted to restore him, love him. And in that moment in John 21:15, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said. You know that I love you. Jesus said, then feed my lambs. And he goes on to do that twice more because he knows that his heart needs restored. And you know Peter begins to realize what Jesus is doing. And he doesn't sit there and lecture him and tell him what he's got to do differently and say, Peter, you've got to apologize to me first. And then I'll do this and this and this. And you got to come to this. You got to hit your rock bottom, we like to say. And what Jesus was concerned in that moment is he wanted to love on him and restore him and show him, Peter, I love you. I've already forgiven you. And man, I want to send you out into the plan that you were created for. But it goes beyond that. We see this beautiful restoration. But then what he says is, Peter, now you've been created to go save others. And that's the story of the Good Samaritan. Our job in the church, when others won't stop, when others are too busy, we're called to go to that side of the road, to that wreckage. In Luke 10:33-34, but a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. And then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him, and then paid for his care. His hope was in far much more than just getting that man healed on the side of the road. And what's amazing about my viewpoint in this ministry is that I've had the chance to grow up seeing miracles on a daily basis. I've had the absolute privilege for the last 25 years to work in this place where I get to the blessing of being a father now and raising my children, where they see that miracles happen today. And I want my children to never be at a point in their life where they go, there's no use in praying. There's no point in asking God to do this. It's not going to happen. I want them to think of all the miracles they've seen and all the lives they've seen called back from the grave and be inspired to chase after what God has them for. Many years ago, my dad, who himself had been saved from addiction, who was given another chance at life, at another chance at his marriage, at a second chance at being a dad. He was leading in business at this time. He was saved now, leading very successfully. And he was at work one day when he got a call from my mom. My mom says, will tell you, she was literally sunbathing in the yard. And I joked with my wife yesterday, is that why you like to sunbathe so much? I don't hear Jesus when I'm baking in the sun, but my wife must, all right? But my mom said I was home sunbathing and all of a sudden was covered in the presence of God and felt so impressed that I need to read a certain chapter in Ezekiel. And I had to call my husband. She said, and I called she called my dad and said, Warren, you got to hear this. And she says, he cut her off and said, did he tell you to read Ezekiel? And they were both blown away as this young married couple. And they got home that night, put my older sister to bed and began to read, or put me and my sister to bed and began to read Ezekiel. And God began to do something in their lives. He began to pour into them a vision for a ministry that would be called something like Wayside Ministry, where people who were tossed aside, who were given up on, they said, and this is written in a journal, they would be given another chance at life. So many times as a kid, I heard him pour out his heart at churches and groups all across the United States. I traveled all over the world with him, hearing him share his heart for people to disciple them. People who so many times were passed over because the world was more concerned with what? Me. And we get so wrapped up in me that we miss out on the broken. It's a lot like what happens, and he would literally share this story, and I want you to hear this. He would say, it's like what happens every day, and I can hear my dad saying this story, on an interstate. And he passed away before, right? So he doesn't know this story. He says, what happens every day on the interstate is there are these wrecks that happen. And I remember hearing my dad saying they would be down a ravine. And he would say, but the problem is we're the traffic up above. And we're flying down through life. And we're busy. And we've got places to go and kids' sports to be at. And the meal's already in the oven, and so we don't want to burn it. And we got our church clothes on. And we're going to important places like church. And we're going to do really important Christian things. And so we don't stop. Or we don't even notice the wreckage on the side of the road. And there's people, he would say, in the ravine dying, desperately needed rescue. And what I would hear my dad pour out his heart is saying that, Warren, I've called you to notice the wreckage. I've called you to see the tire tracks that go down the ravine. I've called you to be willing to wreck your normal to save others. To run down that ravine and forget about your clothes and forget about your schedule and find out who needs rescued and do whatever it takes to bring them to a place where they can be rescued. So many times you would share that our sinners are set aside, a place of rescue, a greenhouse where God would be able to water and feed and fertilize his sons and daughters that he had brought set aside. That our job was called to disciple them. And I can hear him sharing his heart. And on that Sunday morning, God had a bus full of men that he had saved, that in so many ways have been called useless in so many ways. They were the ones who wanted to stop to save a life. And I want to read you Bruce's wife's letter, who we got to meet that day, who was very nervous and gave us this letter. She said, I don't want to read it. I want you guys to read it to them when you get in the van. She said, we have never met, yet what you did that day had and continues to have a profound impact on my life. Not a day goes by that I don't think about your selfless actions and how my life would be very different today if not for all of you. I cannot adequately express my gratitude. I don't think there are enough words in the English language to tell you how grateful I am for each and every one of you. Because of you, I realize now more than ever that each day is a precious gift. And I hope to continue to honor all of you by living a life of kindness and grace. And I hope that if you ever doubt your self-worth or feel that you are not making a difference in this world, that you will remember that you are my heroes. Thank you. And I want to challenge us today at New Hope, because that's me too and my family, is that we are called to notice the wreckage. We are called to see the hurting and the broken and the desperate. We're called to deviate from our schedules and our meals that might burn at home and all the different things that we have on our schedule, to stop in that store, to pull the car over, to see those people, to spread the message of freedom, to put down our pride and at times human-derived boundaries that we've set up, and sometimes over-spiritualized things like seasons of no, that we like to use phrases like that. I'm really thankful that in my life, God has never once, when I've ran to him for forgiveness, said, Michael, I'm in a season of no. He has every time opened his arms, every time said exactly what I needed to hear, given me his plan, covered me, loved me, filled me with his love and his grace and his mercy. And as a church, we are called to forgive, to share that same grace and mercy to those that are dying all around us. And I want to tell you this today, that you can stand there and say that I don't know if I know someone in addiction, but I'm telling you, you do. In every one of your circles, there are people dying of addiction. And sometimes they've become really good at hiding it. But inside, they're dying. And we need to be willing to say, God, give me your eyes. Show me those that need that message. That it might feel really awkward for me to go up and say, I don't know what it is, but God just told me to tell you he loves you, that he has a plan for you, and that there is hope. And why do we want to do this? Because it's not because they were the prodigal sons that were saved. It's because you and I, all of us, are the prodigal son who has been given an opportunity to live, given a second chance at the life he created us for, that would have lived under the weight of sin that we could not pay for, that he paid for. And he heals and restores and empowers. And so what our challenge is today is we're going to spend some time praying as a church. But first, if I want to share this before we pray, is that if you have someone in your life and you desire, how do I even start the process of getting them in somewhere like SheepGate, or even talk to them? Maybe they don't come to the program, because that's not our ultimate desire. Our ultimate desire is that they're saved and live in freedom. But if you want to get questions answered, we have a booth outside. We'll have staff out there, admission staff. They can answer any questions you have. There's pamphlets you can take. There's ways for you to get involved. People always say, how could I be involved in a ministry like SheepGate? I don't have a background in drugs and alcohol. And what I say is, do you have a background in Jesus Christ? Are you saved? Then you have a way to volunteer in our ministry. And there's so many opportunities. We have some amazing classes, elective classes that our guys are involved in. They get to be a part of, whether it's art classes or cooking classes or trades, things that we've just started to schedule up. We've got some people lined up to teach some of them this year. But if you have a passion, a hobby, a trade, you want to come out and teach, come talk to us about it and sign up. There are so many ways that you get involved in our ministry. We desperately need you to partner with us. New Hope's been a faithful supporter of ours forever. And I don't want to not do this without saying thank you. Your mission dollars helps places like SheepGate. 99% of our men and women do not have the funds to come in our program. We give scholarship, hundreds of thousands of dollars of scholarship every single year to our students, so we don't have to turn them away. So we raise that money, and your faithful support is part of helping us meet that need. And as the guy that's over the budget that is increasing every year, like all of our budgets are because of where we are in this world today, I can't thank you enough for your faithful support. And we need partners like New Hope to partner with us, because we can't do it alone. And so we just want to say thank you. But at this time, I want to ask for two things. If you are here in this room and you're struggling in addiction and you're brave enough to come up here, we want to pray for you. But if that's not you, and there's someone in your life that you want to stand in the gap for, I would encourage you, don't be embarrassed. Say, well, what if I go up there and I'm really standing in the gap for someone else, but they think I'm the one? Who cares? Not a person in our program will not be able to tell you of someone in their life that didn't give up praying. And so, would you come up here this morning and allow us to pray with you? And we're going to stand in the gap because we believe that there is hope in the darkest of situations. And we want to be able to stand in the gap with you, to pray with you, to cover them in prayer. And so again, just thank you for this opportunity. Please come and talk to us if you have questions. I'm going to pass it off to Pastor Zach when he wants to come up and close. But at this time, I'll be down front. If you want to come pray, I'd love to pray with you, or whoever else the church has up here. We want to be able to pray for those and believe that God has a plan for their life.